Well, as with all things, let's start with prayer. First, I want to say good morning and welcome to Grounds for Discussion. And as I said, as with all things that we do and I do, we will open with a prayer. Eternal God, we begin today first by giving you thanks. You are our rock. You are the firm foundation for everything we do and everything we build. This morning, you give us a special gift through the presence of Mr. Michael McMillan. As Mr. McMillan speaks, we pray that you would broaden our thinking and deepen our understanding by giving us open ears, hearts, and spirits.
What do you want, this?
And we ask you to inspire our thoughts, ideas, and discussions as we seek ways to work together, to ensure that we continue to do the work you have given us to do. Amen. And now I will turn this over to Clark.
Well, I would be pleased to introduce Michael. I'm anytime, but we actually debated about who should do it, and Alan Ivey agreed to do it. So,
all right, Alan, thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. And before we make the introduction of Mike McMillan, just some logistical instructions. So at the end of Mike's comments, he will take questions and continue the conversation. So I would suggest or ask that you use your raise hand button or the chat in order to submit a question. And then once at the end, we'll go through the questions from the chat and address them in that manner. This morning, it gives me just great pleasure and honor to be able to introduce my close friend, Mike McMillan, to the St. Peter's Parish. And there was a bio that was attached, and I'm not going to go through the bio, but I would strongly encourage you to read that. Mike is extremely accomplished. He's a proven leader. He's a man of his word. When he says he's going to do something, he absolutely sees it through to conclusion. And there's no one better in the St. Louis community and perhaps even nationally to talk about race relations and how to bridge the gap between the African-American community and the Caucasian community. It's been my pleasure over the last several years to be active on the Urban League board. St. Peter's also has 3 other of our members are also on the board. John Sant, who joins me on the executive committee, and Dorothy Martin and Christy Barnes. So St. Peter's does have a close tie to the Urban League. So with that, I am going to turn the podium, so to speak, over to Mike McMillan.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Alan, for the introduction. Thank you, Pastor, for the prayer, and thank all of you for joining me this morning as we talk about race in St. Louis and Ferguson and where we have come from and where we are going to and what all we can do, quite frankly, to make St. Louis a better, more cohesive region. I also wanted to acknowledge John Sant as a board member and all of the other board members. So you'll be proud of the fact that your church, to the best of my knowledge, has more members of the board of directors than any other church in the entire region on the Urban League's board. After we merged with Grace Hill, we inherited and asked some of the leaders of the Grace Hill board to join us. And as a result of that, they joined Alan, who has been on the board now for close to 8 years, who has been very active, not only on executive committee, but chair of the audit committee and the HR committee and so many other things. And we work together on a number of other projects in the community. So I commend you for wanting to bridge the gap, make a difference, and bring St. Louis together. So I will just give you a bit about myself, a bit about the Urban League, and then also to talk about really the overall status of the community and where we are at the moment, and I think where we can be. I myself am a native St. Louisan. I've lived here my entire life. I went to Catholic grade school, high school, and college. Of course, all of us from St. Louis want to know where a person went to high school. So I went to St. Roch Grade School in the Central West End, close to the Urban League headquarters here, and then to St. Louis U High for a couple of years, to Berg High for a couple of years, and then graduated from St. Louis University with a degree in African American Studies with a minor in political science and an emphasis on finance. And I then took a career in government and spent 20 years working for the city as an administrative assistant to the mayor. And then I was a member of the Board of Aldermen from age 25 to 35. And then I was in that very popular, very warm and fuzzy office called license collector for about 7 years, that is in charge of business taxation that everyone loves to see coming and going. When I had that job, when people would see me at a cocktail party, they usually turned right around and walked the other way, hoping they had paid all their taxes. So now I'm glad that chapter is over and we're here at the Urban League. So I've been here for almost 8 years. I'm proud of the fact that we're the #1 Urban League out of almost 100 affiliates in the country. We were created in St. Louis 103 years ago, sadly based on a racial tragedy in East St. Louis. There was a race massacre that took place in East St. Louis at a time when there was a unionizing effort in the community, and some companies that were over there did not want to allow the unions to organize and to pay higher wages. And so as a result, they thought that they would bring in some African-American workers to take some of the jobs and to do the work that was not being done by the individuals that were trying to get higher wages and things of that nature. And as a result, there was a huge massacre of tremendous proportion where hundreds of African-Americans were displaced, many people were killed, and some people, were the victims of an enormous amount of violence. So the federal government actually at that time stepped in the Department of War to create the Urban League. And sadly, the race relations in East St. Louis were so bad in 1917 that even the federal government could not control the environment and create an East St. Louis Urban League. So as a result, we created a St. Louis Urban League in 1918, and then eventually went over to East St. Louis to try to bring about some calming effect and some resources for the African-American community that had been displaced. Our national headquarters is in New York, and we were created there really out of an effort to improve race relations between Blacks and whites, bring people together, and serve African Americans who were coming into urban cities, fleeing the Jim Crow era discrimination of the South. So as you looked at these huge amounts of African Americans that were coming to major cities, there was a combination of white philanthropists, business people, corporate leaders, and government leaders, and really at the time, Black social workers, to come together to say, let us create an organization to serve these people, provide for their needs, help them adjust into the community, and really do something to improve race relations across America. And then we spread from city to city. So St. Louis is one of the oldest urban leagues, very proud of the fact that we're the largest. And after our merger with Grace Hill, we now have 20 different offices throughout the region, serving 125,000 people and 350 very dedicated staff and 75 board members, of which I have already mentioned that your parish alone has 4 by itself, and the bishop. So really 5 members of the church that are a part of this, that are part of that legacy in the history of Grace Hill Settlement House that the church created so many years ago, I think 118 years ago to be exact. So the church has a long history of wanting to do something positive in the community, and we are inspired by your willingness to want to continue to do that work. So I myself became familiar with the Urban League really when I was about 10 years old. My mother is African American. and my father was Caucasian and Native American. And so really kind of around 10 years old is when you start to try to, understand race and class and all these different elements of society. And bluntly, I couldn't understand why some people in my family who were darker were seemingly mistreated and in some cases discriminated against, and some of my friends and then others in society, and why one part of St. Louis looked one way and another part of St. Louis looked another way, and why people didn't live close together and the rest. And I started to ask questions and become more involved in trying to understand really why St. Louis was the way it was. And my late uncle at the time, Colonel Clifton Gates, who was a mentor to me, he was one of the individuals that co-founded and started Missouri's only Black-owned bank, Gateway National Bank, and he had a real estate company and a number of other things that he did really as a pioneer, and was the most successful Black businessman at that time. He's the one that introduced me to the Urban League at 10 years old, and he told me that the Urban League was the most important organization in the country that served the needs of African Americans and worked to bring together the races to try to move people into a more cohesive, a better society, in some places we would all want to be. But my uncle was very big on hard work, responsibility, dedication, and the rest. I do know that, Jimmy, I want your cat to participate in this Zoom. I am enjoying that. Forgive me. Zoom has created a whole new environment for all of us as we all work through the logistics. And for those of you who are wondering, as much as I love the Urban League, I am actually in the office. This is not the backdrop that I have in my home. We are not that sophisticated. So I'm actually at work. Because after this, I have 2 more church events to go to in North St. Louis as part of Black History Month and what we're trying to do in the community and giving out some scholarships to some young deserving people. And I tease you, sir, about the cat, but we've all had an incident in the past year, whether it's a child, a cat, or getting ready to make a significant statement to a great group of people, and then the entire Zoom just get cut off. So our whole worlds have been upended in the past year. And technology is always great when it works and a complete and absolute nightmare when it does not. So, but going back to my own involvement with the Urban League. So my uncle told me to join, and he wanted me to get involved, and he told me to become a member when I was 16. So my actual first job was in the finance department of his distributorship that he owned. And so he wanted me to join when I was 16 to buy my own membership, to get involved. And I did just that. And so on my 16th birthday, I joined the Urban League. And just like he said, when I was going to St. Louis U to get that degree in African American Studies, I was able to get 3 scholarships from the university, but it was the Urban League that also gave me a scholarship that gave me the ability to graduate from St. Louis U with no debt. And so what he said about the Urban League stepping in, making a difference and helping others was something that I learned very early. And I had the privilege of serving on the board from age 24 to 30 as a result of my predecessor, Jim Buford, asking me to do so. And then was their alderman for 10 years and have been a lifelong member, and it's been a part of my DNA ever since. Because when you really look at the organization and our history and our impact on the country, we are America's only social service advocacy organization that is designed to bring the races together and also serve African Americans and people in need throughout this year. I also want to commend many of you that I have seen throughout the pandemic that have actually come out and volunteered with us at our large scale food, toiletries, mask, glove, and sanitizer distributions that we have done throughout the entire region. We just did our 28th one yesterday, where we served the community out in Ferguson at Florissant Valley Community College, after we did a Black History program ourselves, which was a salute to African Americans in media. And in terms of the impact that you all have had, not only have you donated as a church, but many of you have given your time in the collective, and then some of you have even come on your own when the church has not been organizing volunteers. So I thank you for that. The Urban League thanks you, because now we are to the point where we have served 92,500 people with about $4.5 million worth of food, toiletries, masks, gloves, and sanitizer, on top of several $1 million worth of rental, mortgage, and utility assistance, really to just help people to stay, with their basic needs and get through this pandemic. And then we're pivoting and giving them the opportunity to work with our employment department and then get a new job and get themselves situated and get back into either the career that they had or get a new career and find ways to take care of themselves and their families. So that was my journey to the Urban League. Where we are today, we're currently here at a new headquarters at Martin Luther King and Kings Highway. Many of us know it as the old Sears building. It is a large complex that we are endeavoring upon to create a beacon of hope and opportunity here in the middle of St. Louis, and especially here in North St. Louis City, because sadly, this neighborhood, this community, not only is it in a federally designated low to moderate income census tract, but it also, really is an area that needs a huge infusion of resources, hope, opportunity, retail, businesses, and economic development right here. And so we moved our headquarters here intentionally from the one we had at Grando Square for almost 50 years. And we're in the midst of a capital campaign that is coming along to renovate this space and really turn it into a jewel that you would all be proud to come to. And many of you already have, as we've done the food distributions and worked with us outside and looked at that. So as we talk about Black History Month, as we are literally on the last day of this very important month, and as we talk about race relations in St. Louis, and we talk about race relations in Ferguson, and we know, especially those of us that are native St. Louisans, or those of us that have lived here over the past 7 years, that St. Louis has been thrown into the national and international spotlight by everything that happened in Ferguson. And we know that with the Stockley case that came after that, and then the killing of George Floyd and all of the other subsequent activities that brought all of really the atrocities that happened to African Americans in this country in 2020. And it brought that really to a national dialogue again of where are we as a nation? What are we doing? How are we working through systemic racism, sexism, homophobia, discrimination in general, and how can we really make a difference and change this paradigm? And it really reminds me of my professional journey to the Urban League. So the church and what you're doing in faith-based influence has an enormous influence on many people. And quite frankly, I chose a career of public service in many ways based on my time with the Jesuit order at St. Louis U High and at St. Louis University, because they used to say every day that you needed to be a man for others, you need to give back, and you need to live the life that Jesus would want you to live, and use your time, talent, and treasure on this earth to manifest it for the betterment of humanity. And so I did that by eventually choosing a career in public service. But it was while I was at St. Louis University taking the introduction to African American studies under the late Dr. Barbara Woods. She had us to read 3 books that talked about race: Up From Slavery and the Soul of Black Folk by Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And then we had to read The Soul of Black Folks. Then we had to read The State of Black America by the National Urban League. And so Du Bois and Booker T. Washington wrote those books about 100 years ago. And then I read The State of Black America, and this was around 1990. And sadly, it literally put me in a state of depression because the exact same issues were still being discussed 100 years later. Racial discrimination in housing, lack of job opportunity, lack of access to capital, health disparities, educational disparities, so many things that were horrible in this country that had not been fixed. And it was after I read that State of Black America by the National Urban League and those other 2 books, I realized that in my own personal case, that my journey would be better suited for me to leave what was going to be a career in business and finance and actually dedicate my life to trying to make sure that 100 years later, people would not be reading about us and looking at the same discrimination and the same disparities and the same inequities and the same systemic issues, and we didn't do anything about it. And so that's why I dedicated myself to a career in public service. Initially, that took the form of going into government because public policy is one of the most important ways that you can change the country. It's one of the most important ways we can change our city, one of the important ways that we can change our state. And so that's what led me to a career in government, but I was always active in charitable and civic and community activities, which ultimately led me to coming to the Urban League. And so really sadly, as we sit here today, so that was around 1990, here we are 31 years later, and we're still having this same conversation. And even though we have made tremendous strides and tremendous progress in many different ways in terms of some of the highest levels of achievement, now that we obviously have had an African-American president, an African-American female vice president, senators that are actually in the Senate of African-American descent, and the highest levels of the Congressional Black Caucus and mayors across the country and so many other people in government, and now starting to even evolve into corporate America. The reason why, in my opinion, that we still have this issue and we still have the feelings that we do in terms of race is that the masses of African-American people have not been lifted to the same level as the people that you see that have made it to the top. So yes, you know, we have changed society and evolved in so many ways. You know, St. Louis has the #1 Black-owned business in the history of this country at over $12 billion in the form of worldwide technology. We have the #1 Urban League in the country. We have the #1 Black newspaper in this entire country as well in the St. Louis American. We have a Black police chief, a Black superintendent of schools. 7 of the 9 citywide elected officials of the city of St. Louis are African-American for the first time. For the first time in the history of this region, we have an African-American prosecuting attorney in St. Louis County that defeated a long-term sitting incumbent in the form of Wesley Bell. And you have a long-time system that had never really been changed in the form of the prosecuting attorney in the city as well, also an African-American. So these things are unprecedented in terms of the historic ways that people have been shut out and left out of opportunity. But sadly, because the masses in the community have not experienced the same level of growth and opportunity, you have people that are in a position where the community still feels this lack and this frustration of access to resources because they're still living these disparities. You know, they're still living with no jobs in their immediate community for them to turn to. They're still living with and dealing with low income housing, low income situations when it comes to their capacity to have transportation to get to good jobs, for health disparities and so many other things. So therein lies the question, how do we fix that? How do we come up and set up systems, and how do we set up things to build equity, not just diversity? We can have diversity, and often diversity doesn't last when you don't have inclusion, because even if you take someone and put them into a situation where they don't feel comfortable, they'll leave. And so you see African Americans and women and Latino and other minorities get hired into positions or brought into scenarios that they don't feel comfortable, and then they leave. So that's why you have to have the diversity and inclusion. But in order to deal with the systemic issues, and really at this time, quite frankly, the manifestation of 402 years worth of racial problems in this country, you have to deal with equity. How do you set up programs, policies, and procedures to bring people to the table that have never had access, never had the occasion to be involved, and to give them the tools and to give them the resources so that they can be on an equal playing field? And literally, that's what we do at the Urban League every day. I mean, our ultimate goal is to work ourselves out of existence and provide people with the ability to take care of themselves and their families and improve race relations to the point that there's no longer a need for an Urban League. Sadly, I believe, though, we will be needed for quite some time because our country is just not quite ready yet for that. And there's so much poverty and there's so much disparity with the community that we deal with. And I can tell you, just as a St. Louisan, there is not, if you wanted to say, let's go have dinner in North St. Louis, where I would like to take my family and sit down and have a meal, there's almost no place for you to go in St. Louis, in the northern part of this city, to even have a sit-down meal with your, dinner with your community. And when you look at a lack of investment, a lack of infrastructure, and the transient nature of the community, because of that lack of resources and the rest, you have students that are moving time and time again in the middle of a school year, making an already difficult urban education even more so difficult, that then when a person graduates, they don't have the tools to succeed. So there are things that we can be proud of. There are successes, but I think that one of the fundamental reasons why St. Louis has not become what it could be is because diversity is not automatic. We have not made diversity automatic. If you look at where St. Louis was in 1960 with its population and where Atlanta was in 1960 with its population, and you look at where we are now, and you look at where Atlanta is, Atlanta made a conscious decision from a business standpoint to say, we are too busy to hate. And so even though they were in the heart of what the Confederacy was, they said, we are going to make a conscious effort to undo the mental, physical, and psychological chains and the issues that have come out of slavery and the Confederacy, and we're going to go in the exact opposite direction. We're going to bring together business leaders, civil rights leaders, community leaders, corporate leaders, and we are going to have one city united for a just cause to make a difference. As a result of being a welcoming, growing economy, a welcoming, growing city that is known just for that, Atlanta's population as a region has grown by almost 1 million people every decade. They now have the busiest airport in the world. Clark can tell you better than anybody because they have probably designed so many airports across this country. St. Louis, sadly, as we all know, does not have the busiest airport in the world. So when you look at where we were, where they were, embracing everyone in the community, giving everyone access and opportunity, and having it be real and perceived, has given them a global status that literally has now at this point changed the whole course of the nation based on the evolution of that state, the evolution of that community, the evolution of Atlanta as a region. And I firmly believe that we can be the Atlanta of the Midwest and really take the time, effort, energy, and have the tenacity to continue on with diversity, inclusion, and equity and move this community forward. When you look at Ferguson, it's a perfect example of seeing what was wrong in a government system and taking some demonstrable steps to fix it. Ferguson community was about 67% African-American when Michael Brown died and when all of the events happened there in that community. But as we all know, only 3 of the members of the 53-person police department were African-American. And in 120 years, they had only elevated 1 person to the rank of sergeant, which is the lowest rank of any officer that you can have in a police department. And they had 1 out of 6 of the actual council members was African-American in a city that was 67% African-American. Never had a black mayor. And on top of that, the other thing that they didn't have, their entire cabinet that runs the departments and all of the infrastructure of that city, none of them were African-American. Not 1 person in any of the positions of leadership. And as we all know from reading and understanding all of the many articles that have been written about the city of Ferguson, their police department was not there to protect, it was there to ticket and fine and build a budget based on the backs of poor African-Americans to the tune of $20+ million that really did not need to happen on an annual basis. And so what you saw was a resentment in the community, so that when this man did die, and that between that and him laying on the ground for 4.5 hours and everything that ensued after the fact, then you saw this spark that ignited an entire region and an entire nation and a conversation about race, justice, equality, and police community relations. Because in many cases in the African-American community, the police department was seen like a military occupying force, not a protect and serve force. And so that's how this small suburb of 20,000 people, this small little city out of this 3 million person region that we all love, became this national center of negative race relations. But here we are today, where now they have the second African-American police chief of Ferguson. Half of the police department is now African-American. And they have sergeants, captains, and lieutenants, not just one sergeant in 120 years. And they have their first Black mayor. One of their city council members, Wesley Bell, is now the prosecuting attorney for the entire county, all of the 1 million people in St. Louis County. And you have half of the city council that is African-American. And it reminds me really of something that, quite frankly, is one of my favorite quotes, and Alan has probably heard me say this a million times. You know, Nelson Mandela said that it always seems impossible until it is done. And now you see the impossible that has been done in the city of Ferguson. Is it a continuous journey? Absolutely. But they have definitely made progress. You see where people are involved, and they have a feeling that they have leadership and capacity within the government. And when I was, quite frankly, learning more about, community service, giving back, helping others, the Jesuit mission, being a man for others, and the rest, there was a Jesuit that used to tell us every single day that the 3 most important days in your life are the day that you were born, the day that you die, and the most important one is the day that you understand what your purpose is on this earth. And so I believe that all of us should incorporate a mission of service, giving back, and helping make St. Louis the best community that it can be. Because he used to also tell us that in terms of when you are born and when you die, you cannot choose either one of those dates. And the only thing that represents you when you do is a dash on your tombstone. And the question becomes, what do you want that dash to mean? And how do you want to be remembered? And what do you want your legacy to be? So I thank you for this opportunity, and I'm now available for any questions that you might have. And it looks like John and May have a question. It's good to see them. But you're on mute.
So anyone who would like to ask a question, you can submit it through the chat, or put your raise your hand feature, and we'll call on you.
The way you raise your hand feature, for those who don't know, is if you look on the bottom of your screen, you see reactions over on the right. And if you click on that, you'll see the raise hand feature.
Katie, I'm going to need your help in recognizing the raise your hand, because I'm on my iPad and my screen's not large enough to see everybody.
Yep. Okay. I'll check on that. I'll see if I can follow that. Thank you.
I see Bob Duffy and Linda McKay have raised their virtual hands.
Okay, let's start with them.
Which one of us?
Bobby, you go.
Okay.
And then Linda. How about that? Sorry.
Hey, Michael, thank you for that wonderful introduction to what's going on. My concern is with this January 6th insurrection, and what that and the effect that that's going to have on race relations in the country, because it seems that not only are we polarized about Donald Trump, we're polarized about our African American and people of color populations as well. Does that diminish your optimism about getting everybody together at a sort of an elite level to do the work of that needs to be done, or are you coming from a position of pessimism, which I must admit that I am?
Well, I would say, for all of us that love this country, January 6th really was a nightmare that you never thought you would ever live to see happen in this country. And I think that it is the result of years of questioning facts. I hate the fact that we have really kind of devolved as a society where we act as though we can no longer trust the facts of the media. I mean, I remember as a child, watching the evening news and watching Walter Cronkite and all these other people. That was a standard daily activity to find out the impartial truth of what was happening locally and nationally. And now we've gotten to a point where so many people in this country do not believe the news that they receive from the majority of the press. And I think it is a terrible thing for this country. I think it has led to where we are today. And if you think about the fact that the Confederate flag never made it into the United States Capitol during the Civil War, but it made it into the Capitol of the United States, the hall of our democracy, on January 6th, is tragic. And I've never seen any nation on earth where so many people actually celebrate an insurrection of its own citizens to destroy the very government that we all cherish in this country. So yeah, it was extremely depressing. And I think the fact that statesmanship has really diminished across the country. And I think that sadly, when you look at the political discourse across America, people that are bridge builders are pretty much run out of the party at this point, and people can be primaried from either side. So all of that is very disappointing. I still have hope that there are enough of us that want the country to do the right thing and want this country to be the best version that it can be. And the other thing, that was so disappointing about this whole effort about the election is, and if you look over time, no party wins every election. I mean, power goes back and forth all the time between, Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate and the White House. And we have to have faith in our electoral system and our elections and the rest. And I think all of that is very sad, because when people feel as though their government and their elections are not legitimate, I sadly fear for the lives of some of the members of the United States Senate and the rest, especially when you have a 50-50 power base in this country that is completely split, that you have any number of fanatics that might do anything. I think that we have to do something, those of us that really are concerned about the nature of the discourse and the civility across America, that we speak up and speak out, and that our voices are heard, and that we are not the silent majority.
Well, I agree completely with you that the road to hell is paved with inaction. And the more we can do with conversations such as this that then generate action, the better off we're going to be. So thank you very much for your answer.
Thanks. Linda, you had a question, I think.
I did. I have two, and I'll do both at the same time. I'd like for you to speak to the issue of education and some of the work the Urban League is doing in that area, the disparity of quality education in some of our communities. And the second is very much I studied the Atlanta, I can't say it, my mind's gone blank. Anyway, the system in Georgia and Atlanta, sorry, that have you talked to any groups around St. Louis taking that direction also? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the Urban League is very big on advocating for a quality education and trying to get our students the best resources that we can. One of the ways that we go about doing that, that Alan and John and the rest of the members of the church know from being on our board, is a program called Head Start. Head Start serves children from 0 to 5 that are low to moderate income and anyone that would like to participate, to try to give the students educational resources so that when they actually start school, they'll be on an even playing field with people and be able to excel and have a fundamental base that would be equal to other students. We have a scholarship program where we give out assistance to individuals to go to college. And we have an education advocacy arm where we try to promote and advocate for local and national policies that would impact in a very positive way the educational systems here in the St. Louis community and then nationally as part of the National Urban League Coalition on Education. So we definitely are promoting that. And yes, to answer your second question, we do look at and talk about the Atlanta models on several different levels. And some of those things were recently incorporated into the Greater St. Louis 2030 jobs plan for economic development for the next 10 years.
Thanks, Michael. I think the John and Mighty Sant had a question. Do you?
I did. I was hoping that we could figure out a way where we, as many churches, if we get together, we have an awful lot of experience. A lot of us have been involved in many different programs in the cities in one way or another, whether it's Gateway to Greening or supporting Hawthorne School or Girls Inc. or down Danforth School of City Academy. Piecemeal and donating money to food banks, but we haven't really kind of collaboratively worked together as kind of teammates with people within the inner city. And how can we best feel that we are experiencing knowing more, frankly, Black people through our churches and through programs that we're involved in?
Well, I thank you for that. You know, I think that we have to be conscious, just like the church, you know, is doing now in terms of having this conversation about race and how we can all come together. And then we have to be consistent in terms of continuing the conversation, because obviously, you know, as we have been on this journey in this country and in this region, we haven't fixed these issues. And then I think that we have to be purposeful. And so, of course, from the Urban League standpoint, we are always ready, willing, and able to provide people with any opportunity to get involved with any of our programs and any of our activities beyond the ones that you all have already done. And we'd happily do anything we could with any partner organizations that the church would like to get involved with, that we work with and you may not have a relationship with, to get people into the city, into North County, into some of these programs and really get a greater understanding and give capacity for volunteerism and involvement on whatever levels that the church as a whole and members would like to have.
Thank you.
It sounds like we have a great portal through you to be involved. And I have a couple more questions if you have time. The first one is Alan had asked, and I'm going to say these both, well, let's see. Alan had asked, please talk about the importance of jobs and job readiness, also the Save Our Sons program. And then after that, we have a question from Jimmy, and that's probably all we're going to have. Oh no, we've got a little more time, don't we? Sorry. I don't mean to rush us off.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, if you really look at all of the programs that we do at the Urban League, which now there are 55 different programs, education is the great equalizer, because if you give someone a quality education and you advocate for them to receive one, it gives them the tools to succeed. But ultimately, as Alan just mentioned, you really need a job and some economic security to take care of yourself and to have a career and really then live the American dream that we all aspire for. So luckily for us, locally and nationally, no organization has placed more Black people in jobs than the Urban League. The Urban League really opened to corporate America and so many different industries to African Americans over time, especially historically under the leadership of our late national president, Whitney Young, and really kind of opening the doors of corporate America and trying to make that difference on inclusion and diversity. And we continue to this day with that same effort. Save Our Sons is a program that I had the privilege of creating following the Ferguson crisis. Because when that happened, you know, bluntly, every single night from August the 9th all the way up until the verdict in November, there was some type of activity going out there in the streets of Ferguson. And so what we did was we would change clothes from our professional attire and we would go out, you know, and just meet and talk to individuals and ask them what they needed. And literally every single young man said, I need a job. I need a way to take care of myself, take care of my family. Can the Urban League hire me, or can you place me someplace because my parents got their first job from the Urban League? Can you do the same thing for me? I had only been on the job for a year and I went back and checked our data, and 70 to 90% of our clients are single female heads of household. And even though the programs were not specifically designed for women, men were not coming into the doors. And when I asked them, many of the men said they were embarrassed that they wanted to, you know, and needed the help, and they didn't know where to go and what to do. And so we created a program just for them called Save Our Sons, which has now placed over 1,000 African-American men, primarily young men, that needed help into jobs. It started in our Ferguson Center. Is now here at our headquarters at MLK and Kings Highway. And we have a prison reentry program with the state at Algoa State Penitentiary. And we may be able to expand it over to East St. Louis and St. Clair County, Illinois, because of course the problem is not just here in the city and in North County. Because it's desperately needed to try to tie opportunity, mentorship, information, and training to these young men that haven't had that access, give them all of those things, and then get them into a job and then follow up with them and make sure that they keep that job and that they then have a career and have the ability to excel, get promoted, and do other things with their lives.
Oh, that's so impressive. It's just amazing. So I think Jimmy has some questions, and then Clark.
Hello, nice to meet you virtually, Mr. McMillan. I've seen you for many years, and I remember when you were the license collector, and I didn't mind seeing you when I did see you. So
thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you.
I always thought you were destined to be our mayor, but you know, you went off to bigger and better things. I guess that's fine.
You are kind. We will have a new mayor come April, and the election on Tuesday will be a precursor for the runoff in April.
Yes, sir. So I have a question about the Gateway Bank, and then also just housing and business development in general. Do you think, or did St. Louis Credit Union kind of replace Gateway Bank, or do you think there will be a bank that kind of is geared towards the African American in our community?
So sadly, because Gateway Bank that I was intimately involved with, not only as a customer, but a board member, and also with my family, of course, through my uncle and also his daughter who worked at the bank. Because of its willingness to really focus almost completely on a low to moderate income loans and census tracts and really helping people that were very disadvantaged, Gateway was never a very profitable bank. It literally was the manifestation of what Alan could tell you would be every bank's CRA activities. That's what Gateway was all the time, everywhere. And it served a very important role helping do low to moderate income community development. And sadly, after the banking crisis, it did not survive. And so it was purchased by Central Bank, and Central Bank was not able to continue on with that facility. And the Community Credit Union, as you mentioned, Lynn, later came back and opened a branch at that location that they named the Gateway branch, to try to continue to have a full service financial institution there in that community that desperately needs it. But I think, you know, really the key for all of us working with the banking community is to continue to get them to be creative and focus on living out their CRA mission to the best of their abilities. Sadly, I don't believe that we'll have another Black-owned bank in Missouri based on the evolution of the banking industry and how it has changed over time. That may be the case, but I doubt it. I don't think you'll see that many new banks like that happening. And I think that, you know, in the next 10 years, the banking industry will probably be very different as a whole. And your second question?
I also want to know, how do we then, I am in the process of answering a few requests for proposal for the CDA for the city of St. Louis. And as I was driving around, or as I've been driving around in the last couple of weeks, you just notice there's many houses. So there's a lot of blight in North City, even, you know, right past Delmar, we all know. So how do we, and maybe this is a banking question for Alan, how do we as a community, you know, Urban League, private individuals, how can we get together and maybe develop a plan or viable plan to really churn out the houses in the city of St. Louis, so because they have so many out there that just need to be repaired, and there's plenty of contractors, and probably your employment division could, you know, those are needed positions in not only St. Louis, but in the nation as well.
You know, really what we're missing, and we have not had in several years, is an urban agenda from Washington and an urban agenda from Jefferson City. And if you had an urban agenda and you had a fully funded housing and urban development HUD division of the federal government, then you could come in and really see some significant progress. I mean, you need a massive amount of federal subsidy to come in and actually do some of these projects, because from a business standpoint, one of the reasons why you don't see it is, let's say a block from here, there's a house that is vacant and abandoned and owned by the city, and the city will give it to you for $1 or $10,000 or whatever the amount is. And then in order to bring it up to code, you spend $70,000 renovating it. But because of the neighborhood we're in, it only appraises for $40,000. So then the question becomes, where is the other $30,000 coming? And that's where HUD and or tax credits and other federal and state subsidies could come in and make the difference. But sadly, we have not had an urban agenda for so long, and HUD's budget has been either stagnant or cut for years. If we had the same focus that we've had in previous administrations, and I'm hopeful that the Biden administration will do this, then you could have some resources to come in and help these inner cities to revitalize themselves. Even our headquarters. Our headquarters is going to cost us probably $11 million to renovate and do on the level that it needs to be done for the community. And after we have it appraised, once we have spent the $11 million, it will not appraise anywhere close to $11 million based on where we are physically. And so you have to have, you know, not-for-profits, government partners, tax credits, and federal subsidy to step in to try to help make these projects happen, or else you'll just see continuous decay, vacant and abandoned buildings, vacant lots, and a city that you will not be proud of. And it will then start to, you know, kind of spill over into the inner rings of the suburbs, as it already has.
Thank you very much.
So that's great. I think Clark has a question.
Just a quick thanks, a quick comment and a question for you, Michael. You know, Mighty asked about our ability to work with other people to do good things in and for the city. And a number of us were on a call on Wednesday evening with Bishop Dion Johnson, our diocesan bishop, who is fairly new to the diocese and to St. Louis. And this question came up. Our Sacred Conversation series was mentioned, and he suggested that we at St. Peter's work actively with other parishes that are doing good things with a similar theme, St. Timothy's, St. Michael, and St. George, Trinity in the West End. And so, you know, he suggested that we help to engender a sort of grassroots collaboration around these issues rather than waiting for something to come from the diocesan office, which I think makes a lot of sense. Michael, my question is, the scope of the programs is unbelievable. You're dealing with food, with jobs, with education. The news this morning talks about the COVID vaccine distribution that you all have been a part of and sponsored in different parts of the community. It's unbelievable. How is all of this activity funded?
Well, Clark, it is what I call my 10 cup routine. And I just take that little 10 cup and just go around the whole region and try to pull together the $35 million annual budget that we have this year to try to serve the community as many ways as we can. It is a very complex formula that we have. Out of the 35 million, 75% of our budget is always city, state, and federal grants, strong support from the United Way, and then a lot of corporate and individual and family foundation and other gifts to help make all these things happen.
That's a big job, that 10 cup routine.
That 10 cup is busy, Kate. It's busy. There's a lot going on with that.
One question I had, which is that we're trying to, that sort of follows on what Clark was saying, is if you could give St. Peter's and those parishioners at St. Peter's who really want to make a difference in this regard in our community, a prescription, what would it be? What can we do now, today, tomorrow, both as a parish and as individuals? In your mind, what are the small steps that we can take?
Well, I would say the small steps on a personal and collective basis would be to continue to push the envelope on getting out of your comfort zone, to come to these large scale food distributions, to come to the office during the week and volunteer, to come to places that you would not normally go to, and to be a part of trying to do something positive in the communities that need it the most, and to change the conversation and the philanthropic priorities that you have in circles that you have. So many times people underestimate the influence that they have in their sphere of influence and how many people that they could bring to bear for a project and how many individuals would listen to them, whether it's on social media, family, friends, church members, and the rest. And then I would say that collectively, going back to Clark's question and the discussion that they had with the bishop, I know that the bishop has been talking to James Clark from our office and others about us working on a project together and doing some things in the grassroots community. And the church has a long history of that, because everything that came out of our merger with Grace Hill meant that, quite frankly, we're all inextricably tied together, because 118 years ago, this same mentality and very similar group of people is what created Grace Hill as a settlement house in St. Louis. And so that history is a part of your mission. And then how do we manifest it today? How do we come together and show something demonstrable to the community? And so we'd be happy to partner on any one of those things that could be very small in scale in terms of, the volunteer activities, or could be larger in scale in terms of some of the housing that I know the bishop has talked about, or some of the other things that we could look at doing. And I would also say, sometimes it's better to do it, in my opinion, especially as a former city official, in a manner that you can see the success of it. You want to be able to see the success. Success breeds success. Last year, when we started our large scale food distributions, I bluntly did not have a clue how I was going to put together what would become $100,000 that ended up to $250,000 a week of food, toiletries, PPE, and the rest together. But it was like putting a great snowball together on Art Hill and pushing it down the hill, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, because success breeds success. And so I would say, whatever we do, let us do it in a manner that we can show it to the community, that people can see it physically, and that it is close to the synergy of something else. Because so often when people feel like, you know, they're just throwing money into a black hole, they're not as excited about doing something that they don't feel like is going to make any difference. But if we come and do something collective, whether it's around the Grace Hill campus or whether it's around our new headquarters on Dr. King and Kings Highway, we could do something where people can see, feel, and touch it.
All right, thank you.
So, Michael, thank you so much for being part of our conversation today. Your words were insightful, and the work that the Urban League is doing is fantastic in the community. And we really appreciate you being a part of our program today. Since Shug has departed, I will try as a layman to offer a prayer as we close out our conversation this morning. So please join me. Dear Father, we thank you today for this conversation. We thank you for the great work being done by Mike McMillan and the Urban League throughout the St. Louis community. We thank you for the St. Peter's Parish and the involvement the parish and the members have in trying to make St. Louis a better place. And we ask that you soften all of our hearts, not only us on the Zoom meeting today, but throughout the St. Louis area. Soften our hearts. Let us try and listen, walk in others' shoes, and gain a greater understanding of people that may look different than us, but we know that in the inside are the same as us. Thank you, dear Father. Amen. This will conclude our
This man's a
session
banker
today.
for Simmons Bank. He's a vice president.
This will.
You're not on mute, whoever's speaking. Okay.
This will conclude our session today. Our next month, our guest speaker will be the Reverend Andre Alexander from the Tabernacle Church, also the head of Tabernacle Community Development Corporation. And I think that will be another fantastic presentation and conversation. So thanks everybody for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you. Yeah.